Happy Halloween, chaps! 'Tis I, Clumpatcher139. Having already talked about Nintendo's version of a Ghostbusters game, it only feels right to give the original guys their time in the spotlight. Like how the Arkham games make you feel like Batman, Ghostbusters the video game makes you feel like a Ghostbuster. With a proton pack strapped to your back and a complete disregard for public safety and property damage, it's up to you to rid the New York streets of those pesky spirits. At least, that's what your bosses want you to think. Since you really have no idea how much you're getting paid for being an intern and are constantly putting your life in danger with these terrifying untested prototypes, why bother actually catching ghosts?
He's right, rookie. Your health insurance doesn't begin for another 89 days.
Can you beat Ghostbusters without busting any ghosts? The rules for this run are more complex than you may think. What exactly do I define as busting a ghost? Well, there are two ways to do it, because there are two kinds of ghosts. Traditional ghosts need to be worn down, then sucked into traps to be hauled off to a containment unit, while much smaller specters and constructs take control of objects you need to destroy. For this challenge, I'm obviously not allowed to destroy possessed objects, as that is obviously busting. But what about the traditional ghosts? Well, I just can't put them into traps, simple as that. So I'm sure by now you're asking, if the point of this game and, the whole franchise is busting ghosts, then how is this challenge even considered remotely possible? Well, that's where the gimmick of this game comes into play.
It's all about teamwork.
Unlike Luigi, you are not a lone Ghostbuster. You have an entire team ready to bust these ghouls alongside you, and that's what this run comes down to. Your companions can do everything you can do, just, worse. They can bust ghosts just like they could 40 years ago, so why not let them do all the heavy lifting if I'm gonna be the one getting my skin burned off? I'm allowed to do whatever the heck I want to these ghosts so long as I'm not the one to bust them. This means I can damage them, beat them down, lure them towards traps, everything except be the one to put the nail in the coffin. So to speak, anyway. So long as my proton pack is shut down while a ghost is being locked in a trap or a specter is blown to smithereens, I didn't technically bust them. Those are the basic rules we're going to be following for this run. So strap in, folks, because there is indeed something strange in this neighborhood. Don't cue the theme song, that's copyright. So if we're not allowed to bust ghosts, then how the heck are we going to beat a game where that's literally our job? As I mentioned, we're going to be relying on our AI companions. Peter, Egon, Winston, and Ray! While they aren't nearly as spry as our young-blooded newbie, they still know how to get the job done eventually. Sometimes we just need to give them little reminders of how to do the one thing they're programmed to do. And we get a perfect showcase of what this run will look like in our tutorial in the Ghostbusters basement. After unfortunately letting Slimer go, we're forced into catching this big glob of disgustingness alongside Ray. While Ray is trying to teach us the basics of ghostbusting, we don't really listen to it and force him into doing all the hard work. We're allowed to wear the big guy down until he's in the red, but we then have to rely on Ray to deliver the finishing blows and trap him in the containment unit. We do the only logical thing and lure him over to the trap while Ray still has his capture stream on him, then let go while Ray finishes the job. Unfortunately, ghosts are very prone to escape from the AI's capture streams because they're just too strong and the computers don't quite know how to fight them. So we have to get a little creative. To ensure our stream is never on the ghost while they're getting sucked into the trap, we have two options. Either we place our trap in the corner and leave the ghost with fewer options to run away, or place our trap right next to one of the AIs so the ghost will have a smaller chance of escape since they'll have to get out of two capture streams. Either way will eventually work. Sometimes you just need to be really patient with these guys. After a little convincing, this big guy eventually gets locked in his trap and we can go after Slimer at the Sedgewick, our first real level. The Sedgewick starts with 7 minutes of wandering around trying to find Slimer with Ray, while we learn about all the mechanics that don't really matter for this challenge. Eventually, we return to the lobby in the midst of a ghost attack and have to capture a couple of bellhops. Since we have all the guys assisting us in this endeavor, we don't have to worry too much. We can wear the minimum wage employees down, place our trap close to Egon's, and let the crew do the rest of the work. With 3 streams on a single ghost, they can barely put up a fight. We have 2 ends before we even get the chance to put any in traps, so we'll worry about all them later. Right now, we've got to work with Peter to track down Slimer. Unfortunately, the hotel manager doesn't want us following the slime ball, so we have to find a different way around. And our way around is through the kitchen, which doesn't provide any regular ghosts for us to defeat, but does face us up against fish. I thought these were regular ghosts in the moment, so started attacking them out of shock without thinking. Realizing I took down a construct, I paused and reloaded my checkpoint, which brings up a very annoying part of this game. The checkpoints are freaking ruthless, man. We'll see this fact more in depth the farther we progress, but just know that I got sent back unnecessarily far and had to do a lot of stuff a second time. When we reached the problem child again, Peter was able to take down all the fish with relative ease. I just had to run around a bit and not get hit. That thankfully led us into the ballroom where we could confront our first boss of the game, Slimer. And I'll just come right out and say it, Slimer was one of the most annoying friggin' parts of this challenge. It took nearly 20 straight minutes of slamming him against the wall and waiting for Peter to maybe get him into a trap, only to fail and repeat the process. 20 straight minutes of hearing one of the most annoying screams imaginable, and the same 5 lines from Peter over and over again. It was friggin' painful, man. And it wasn't even like it was hard or anything. Peter just decided he didn't want to help half the time, and when he actually felt like doing his job, Slimer would always make it nanometers away from the trap before suddenly escaping. Look at this shit! His tail is in the trap, but he just decides to break away at the last moment. So what I had to do was something I thankfully didn't have to bother with for the rest of the game. I had to wrangle Slimer while he was in the trap cone and slightly nudge him in the right direction so he wouldn't escape. Now, my stream was not on him when he went into the trap, so this doesn't technically count as busting the ghost. But it didn't quite sit right with me, so just know that I didn't do it for any other ghost for the rest of the game. And even then, I had access to the fast trap upgrade at this point in the game, and enough money to buy it, so had I not been an idiot and just bought that, Slimer would have gone in without much of a fight, because fast traps are kinda broken for this challenge, spoiler alert. Anyway, that's one boss defeated, but a whole hell of a lot more game to go. We're only 40 minutes into this recording, so let's try to speed things up a bit. We've got 3 bellhops back in the lobby, which are disposed of rather quickly now that we have our full team back together. These guys aren't the problem. Who is the fisherman ghost. He transforms this floor into an ocean and separates us from Egon, meaning we have to track him down on our own. As we do so, unfortunately, we reach our next roadblock. He turns these candlesticks into constructs that we have to destroy. Now, I thought I was being clever here during the stream as I tried breaking them with the random furniture around me. I thought I could break them with that, and since that isn't technically my stream breaking them, then it wouldn't count as busting. I was sorely mistaken. It was actually remnants of my capture stream breaking off the object and hitting the candlesticks that caused them to die, not being hit with the furniture. At the moment, I was so excited at having a new way to do this challenge that I was blinded to the facts of reality and just kept throwing my head at this stupid idea thinking it would work. In doing so, incrementing the terrible checkpoint system that sent me back upwards of a full minute before I could try again. But in the end, I was wrong. So we have to change our challenge up and start up a counter. How many ghosts do you need to bust to beat Ghostbusters? Doesn't quite roll off the tongue the same, does it? Same rules as before, but with the addition of a counter in the corner telling you how many things I've actually busted. Let's get the counter going very high right away, as we can add 8 constructs from the first wave of candlesticks. But trust me, that isn't nearly all of them. We take out 4 more in this hallway after getting jump scared by a vending machine, and then 10 more after rounding the corner, giving us a grand total of 22 constructs already busted. I will note that I'm going to keep track of which ghosts specifically we end up busting so we can go down the priority list as far as how severe our busting shenanigans were. And right now, all we get to add are constructs. While immediately after, we do take a bit of revenge against the fisherman who created these things, we don't need to worry about busting him since he flies away before we can finish the job. The guys then reunite with us and we're forced to take down a golem. Golems are a weird case, because for all intents and purposes, our friends should be able to take them down. But for some reason, we have to be the one to deliver the finishing blow. That's because the golem's gimmick is ripping off some piece of their face to remove the spirit inhabiting it. Or something like that, I don't know. Point being, our crew just can't rip this piece off for some reason. So we have to be the one to do it whenever a golem pops up. Thankfully, this golem is inhabited by our fishing friend, so we don't actually have to add a ghost to our busting total. We will later, though. This just leaves us with the different prospects of trapping the fisherman, which is only difficult because he likes to hide up in the rafters and escape our capture stream so much. When we can finally get him into a trap cone, the guys can get him in no problem, because, there are 3 of them. Finally finishing the first level of the game over 80 minutes in. Level 2 takes place on the Manhattan streets and has us taking down the big bad of the first movie, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. The start of this level has us trying to reach him down a long city street with Ray and Egon in Ecto 1, while Peter and Winston work with us to take any silly specters down. Even though we're technically a man down, Peter and Winston can more than pull their weight in this first part of the level, as we are now introduced to a whole hell of a lot of new ghosts to deal with. First are molten marshmallow globs, which are actually pretty difficult to deal with. They have a lot more health than your average construct, so relying on the guys alone to take them out is a terrible idea, especially since the guys do basically half as much damage as you. You need to wear them down a little, then hope the guys can finish them off. On top of that, they gang up on you with serious numbers. You're looking at 4 of them in a single group at a minimum, and upwards of 10 to 20 in the later parts of the level. And if your stream happens to not hit the right one, you're on your way to the loading screen. Thankfully, these are the hardest new enemy to deal with, and at least in the early sections of the level, you've got 2 allies to take heat off of you while you try to wear them down. The others are just regular old ghosts, which are dealt with much more easily in this section thanks to the Super Slammer on Ecto 1. With that upgrade, you've just got to wear them down a little, then let the guys guide them over to the car, and they'll instantly be dealt with. The only caveat you need to worry about is not accidentally trapping one yourself while you slam them around. But as long as you know where the car is, this shouldn't be a problem. The final new enemies are gargoyles, which are no threat whatsoever, despite needing to be taken out with a slam attack. Unlike with golems, the guys can actually take gargoyles out with a slam on their own, so you don't even need to pay attention to them. Just focus on everything else being thrown at you and you'll be perfectly fine. This first section where you chase after Stay Puft is pretty easy, if a little time consuming. You just need to wear down a few marshmallow globs for Peter and Winston to finish off, then capture a few ghosts. Under no circumstances should you ever put your stream on a ghost near the car. If you do, you run the risk of unintentionally activating your capture stream while it's right over the Super Slammer, instantly capturing it before you even have a chance to let it go, forcing you to reset. And as I mentioned, checkpoints are extremely mean in this game. So, just don't do that. Just let Peter and Winston do their jobs, albeit do them very slowly, revive them if they go down, and you should be good for the first drive. The opera section is more of the same, though thankfully with far fewer marshmallow globs for us to kill. Just make sure you always prioritize getting your friends up before anything else, or you run the risk of getting a game over and needing to restart from a mean checkpoint. A checkpoint that always sends you really, really far back. But at this point, we've also unlocked the boson darts, which are great for wearing ghosts down from a distance and keeping them tired while being shoved into traps. While the early part of the level was easy, the section following was far from it. Egon and Winston need to stay behind to fix the Super Slammer, while Peter...
Venkman, are you getting coffee? Venkman's getting coffee.
So we're stuck with just Ray. Now, if you thought Slimer was bad, try this early section where we're running from Stay Puft and have to deal with tons of his marsh minions. This took a whopping 25 minutes to get by, and I'm pretty sure the game just glitched out on my winning attempt anyway. The problem is that we are constantly swarmed by mallows that we need to rely on Ray alone to take down. On top of that, Stay Puft is not only constantly throwing more globs at you before you can finish the first wave, but he's occasionally stomping the ground right where you're standing and either knocking you out or knocking you to the ground so you can't help Ray. I died so many times on this section, and this is where my sanity began to go down the toilet as I was constantly screaming, "Ray!" at the top of my lungs in hopes that he would hear me through the screen and actually just do his job. But he very rarely did. The globs would constantly gang up on him, making it impossible for me to hit specific ones to wear them down, and making it impossible for Ray to stay standing for more than 20 seconds. We're also pretty much on a soft time limit, as Stay Puft keeps getting closer to us, trapping us in this corner. And if we don't take down these globs before he reaches us, We're just gonna die before he opens the path forward. It was honestly one of the stupidest sections this entire run. Then again, I don't even think I beat legitimately. At one point, Stay Puft finally opened the way forward, while at the same time killing me and sending my body flying. Instead of being a good teammate, Ray just up and abandoned me. Not only leaving my body behind to suffer, but spawning in the next wave of marsh minions before getting me back up. And when he finally did, the way open was clear as day, so I made a run for it, only slowing down to start whittling down some stragglers. Ray tries to catch up with me, but he's more concerned with peppering Stay Puft than the multiple globs of molten marshmallow gnawing at his feet. So he goes down. At least that's what should have happened. He gets pounced on by a rabid dog and appears to go down, but then suddenly just jolts back to life without a scratch on him. Then Stay Puft does the job for us and destroys all the marsh minions with an earthquake, allowing me to move forward. I have no idea why the game suddenly decided to take pity on me, but as I always say, we take those. So I could move into the building and the next section, which was far easier than that long walk through the streets. In this room, you just need to play Ring Around the Rosie with the front desk and run away from the globs while Ray picks them off. What's weirder is that Ray does go down in this section and needs my assistance, which just made me all the more confused about what happened on the streets. But with that, we finally reached a checkpoint at long freaking last. Only to be thrust into a far worse section 2 minutes later. We're stuck in this tiny room that is some word more intense than swarmed, with a constant bombardment of molten minions. Within 10 seconds, there are at least 20 of them in this one room. A room with no cover, no place to run them in a circle, no way to revive Ray after he goes down, nothing. We're in literally the worst scenario possible for this challenge. I mean, look at this shit. This would be nearly impossible without the challenge, let alone with it. There's so many globs that it lags the game. That's how stupid this section is. Now, I am always determined to try seeing a challenge through if I see I'm making progress. That's why I stuck with Slimer in the first Stay Puft section for so long. I was always making progress and I could always see the goalpost moving ever so slightly closer. But with this, there's just no way. I can't tell even the slightest amount how little progress I'm making each attempt, so I just cut my losses short and killed every glob of marshmallow in this room. Unfortunately, in doing so, I couldn't keep track of the chaos and can't count how many globs I took down. I just can't do it. There's too many things getting in my way to count how much I'm doing and how much Ray might be doing. So, I just didn't. Add a room full of marsh minions to the count and just call it a day, because I'm way too tired to bother doing it myself. Especially when there's a second room that I didn't want to fail and have to restart checkpoint for, so I just killed everything inside there as well. I probably didn't have to, and Ray could have taken them out too, but I didn't want to wait through more loading screens, so I just did the deed and moved on. Thankfully, this much smaller room has a much smaller number of globs to compensate, which Ray can thankfully deal with on his own, with a little wearing down from me. That leads us to the roof, which is thankfully only inhabited by ghosts. Doubly thankfully, Peter decided to finally join us after abandoning his coffee, so we aren't stuck with just Ray. At this point, I also unlocked fast traps, so leaving Peter and Ray capture the ghosts was absolutely no problem. More of a problem, though, is the upcoming fight against Stay Puft himself. We have to constantly knock him off the building with boson darts while slowly whittling his health down with our stream. Unfortunately, that alone would be a pretty boring boss fight, especially since we can't even move from our hanging position and we're doing this solo. Which is why Stay Puft has a single attack he can use against us, which is creating more marsh minions. Yay! We can't just let them climb up the building and eat us because of how many there are, so we have to take them down. Silver lining, he was always spawning the same amount every single time, so it makes my counting job far easier. Throughout the fight, I needed to take down 6 waves of mini-minions, which, with 5 spawning in each wave, means I needed to burn 30 of them throughout the fight. Add Stay Puft himself to the list, since again, I'm the only one actually doing anything in this fight, and that's 31 constructs to add to our tally of busted ghost. I'll give Stay Puft his own counter though, because, why not? He's fun. That finally ends the level with a crap ton added to our counter. Again, this is only level 2 of 7, and I'm already on page 8 of this script. We got a long way to go, folks. Level 3 takes place in the library, and finally gives us a new addition to the Proton Pack, the Stasis Stream and Shock Blaster. The Shock Blaster is fine, no big deal, but the real MVP is the Stasis Stream. This little puppy helps us deal with everything the game will throw at us, without dealing damage to it. It'll freeze everything solid if we keep our beam on it for long enough, which will let our friends come in and finish the job for us much easier than before. While I won't see much use in the early parts of this level, since we're mostly dealing with regular ghosts, it's invaluable when we start getting more constructs. It is unfortunate that we don't get to show this off right away, as our first battle in this level is against a golem of books. And as mentioned before, only we can take down golems, since our buddies don't know how to throw off their heads. And unlike the first golem back in the hotel, this one isn't possessed by a fisherman, so we have to add him to our count. Remember, I'm keeping different tallies depending on how many of each type of ghost we end up busting, so golems are getting their own little counter. After that, we're sent on a wild goose chase for the Grey Lady, and eventually end up separated from the group in a maze of bookshelves. This leads us to our next construct fight, this time something much more dangerous than walking candlesticks. Thankfully, we have the stasis beam and can freeze him solid as we run away towards the ghost we're actually supposed to be chasing for this challenge. In doing so, we have to turn around and refreeze him every once in a while, but it's no big deal, because we eventually enter the loading bay and meet back up with Ray. Unfortunately, Ray is too focused on our new enemy, swarms. Swarms take the form of really small objects and essentially act like bats, swooping down in a large group to overwhelm you. This means he pays no attention to the construct we brought with us and doesn't bother trying to take it out. This is because we brought him from another section, and Ray isn't programmed to attack him, just like he isn't programmed to attack Ray. Maybe there's a way to survive long enough for Ray to get all the books by himself, but I couldn't get it. I died and had to restart checkpoint. But thankfully, this one was far more generous than before, placing me right before the swarm fight without the construct following me. But it also means I need to add another ghost type to our count. Maybe there's a way for Ray to take these books out, but I don't have the patience. He isn't even using the shock blasters, so he's just being incredibly inefficient. I opted to just use the stasis stream to freeze all the books because I thought it didn't defeat them like it does for every other ghost. But since these guys are so brittle, I guess it did. Since I don't want to count every single book as an individual entity, I'm just going to consider the whole swarm as one ghost to count. If Dungeons & Dragons can consider swarms to be one entity, then I don't know why I can't. The swarm isn't the only thing we have to worry about in this room, though. We've also got a pair of ghosts to take out. It took a lot of doing, but I was eventually able to wear them down enough for Ray to come in and finish the job. I had to take some heat off Ray by blasting one ghost while he worked on the other into a trap. Eventually, he was able to get the other guy in a trap as well, and we could move on. That took quite a bit of doing, since there was another swarm that spawned in after trapping the first ghost, so add another swarm to our counter, I guess. Which I dealt with while Ray tried to trap this other ghost. Eventually he did, and we could move into another problematic section, yay! This time we're dealing with a whole host of constructs against just me and Ray, and the problem arises when Ray doesn't want to use the shock blaster. See, if you freeze a construct solid with a stasis beam, then use the shock blaster, they'll immediately be destroyed, which is a combo tool that will come in great use later in the game. Unfortunately, Ray doesn't yet have the shock blaster, so he can't do the wombo combo with me. I've just gotta wait while he slowly whittles these constructs down with the proton stream. Although the process is slow, it is indeed possible after yelling out, "Ray!" enough times. When we confront the Grey Lady again, we are given another swarm of books, which I still end up taking out because Ray is still really bad at his job. Thankfully, just afterwards, Ray nuts up and actually starts using his shock blaster against a group of constructs, so he's finally doing some decent damage for once. This leads us into the kids section, which is just there for creepy vibes and little more. Then into another old section where we get some more constructs. These guys are a lot smarter than the others though because they use shields. Shields which need to be ripped away from them with the proton stream. Afterwards, I can finally show off the wombo combo in its full glory. As I freeze them solid, Ray and Egon follow suit with a shock blast to instantly take them down. This leads us to a section that just decides to throw everything at us. We got swarms, constructs, ghosts, and everything in between. Thankfully, with both Ray and Egon on our side, they aren't much trouble at all. Egon was actually able to take out the first swarm all by himself, while Ray just kinda stood by and let everything hit him, and I tried to set up the wombo combo with the small constructs. When the second wave came in with the shield constructs, I spent most of my time running and reviving, while occasionally trying to freeze anything attacking me solid. I was actually able to avoid attacking the swarm the whole time, so don't need to add that to the tally this time. That led to one final ghost encounter with a swarm as backup, but I was able to whittle the big guy down while Ray and Egon dealt with the swarm. Eventually they were able to get him into a trap, and we could move on. As we venture deeper into the basement, we come across another golem, which we have no choice but to take down. That's not all, because we also have 2 more magma golems in the boiler room, which we also are the only ones to deal with for some reason. Seriously guys, it's not that hard, just grab and flick. You can do it too! Regardless, that achievement gives us a slime blower, which is a perfectly serviceable weapon but is really only useful in very niche scenarios. One of those scenarios is not this upcoming boss fight against the librarian. This one was just annoying. It didn't really take much time to do, but it was just constantly knocking me down with book swarms while I tried hitting the book stands with slime. I eventually gave up on the slime and decided to just use the shock blast so I wouldn't hit any straggling swarms. That thankfully did the job, and I was able to take them all out and fight the ghost head on. Doubly thankfully, it only took this single phase to attack it all the way down to the red, and Ray and Egon were able to trap it rather quickly, so I didn't have to go back to blasting book stands.
Weird. That wasn't as tough as it should have been.
I was just thinking the same thing.
It was almost too easy.
That should have been the end of the level. Seriously, this one just keeps going forever. But we have yet another section to complete. This section takes place in the ghost world, and without any friends to back us up. And yeah, it's pretty much just as bad as you'd expect. First, we have to take down this golem blocking our path. There's just no other way past him. That brings me to playing Portal Roulette until I come face to... lamp? I guess. With another pair of golems, which I have to take down again, adding another 2 to our count. Unfortunately, after that, we're trapped in a hall of mirrors without Ray, and we're forced to capture this ghost completely on our own. There's no way to escape without capturing it, so we must do our part and put it in the trap. Which means we have officially added our first traditional ghost to the count, and our run is more than officially dead. Sad to see it go like this. I really thought we could at least make it without trapping a regular ghost, but alas, here we are. This eventually leads us to one more section with some constructs, but unlike everything else before, we don't have to fight these guys. Just use a stasis stream to stun some of them in place, then run for your life through the level to get to the next checkpoint. You'll more than likely die because of just how many constructs you left standing, but since this checkpoint is past their spawn point, you can get past them without having to bust any. This just leaves a small climb up some stairs which have no ghosts for us to worry about, except some infinitely spawning book swarms, so you wouldn't want to attack them anyway. That finally lets us out of the ghost world, or so you'd think. The game decides we just need one more boss fight before we can finally finish out this level. And boy, it's a doozy. Not even for this challenge, it's just a genuinely difficult boss fight for this point in the game. Azaltor is a giant monster that really likes to constantly throw out attacks willy-nilly until you or your friends are dead. The key to this fight? Never stop moving and never die. If you do, you may as well reset, because there is no way in hell Ray or Egon are going to get you up. They're basically dead weight in this fight, so don't feel bad if you can't quite revive them. He knocks them down in one hit usually, so you'll be playing doctor more than soldier in this fight. It takes a lot of doing, but you're eventually able to whittle his health down. I do try to wait and see at the end of the fight if either of my friends can take him down, but it doesn't do anything. I need to deliver the killing blow on Azaltor, adding another boss ghost to our count. It's honestly ridiculous how hard this fight was when it wasn't even a factor in this challenge. This is just a genuinely hard fight that I think they needed to spend a bit more time balancing. But regardless, it does finally finish this level and we can finally leave this damn library. Albeit with quite a few casualties. That brings us to level 4, the museum, which actually gives us a reason to have the slime blowers. We're introduced to possessors, which, as their name implies, possess our friends and force us to slime them down before we can attack them. Now, since we're not defeating a ghost by exorcising it from our friends, it doesn't count as a bust, so we can slime on our bosses all day long without any repercussions. Don't take that out of context. After freeing Ray from the possessor, it's a simple matter of wearing his health down and letting the guys put her in the trap. Nothing to worry about here, but Trust me, it gets much worse later. And by later, I mean right now. We've got 4 possessors running around this arena causing all kinds of havoc. It doesn't start off too bad. We just need to slime some pavilions and peck necks until the possessors let them go, then start wearing them down. Unfortunately, the guests don't stay for all too long, so there's nobody left for them to possess but our friends. The problem being how many possessors there are, and the fact that they will be constantly taking over our friends' bodies. Remember how many possessors I said there are 12 seconds ago? We've got 4 possessors running around this arena causing all kinds of havoc. And how many Ghostbusters do there happen to be on our team at this moment? You see the problem. These guys are constantly taking over our friends, meaning we don't have anyone to wrangle the ghosts into traps. You'll be in a constant loop of freeing the guys, reviving the guys, trying to wear down the ghosts, and not dying yourself. These icons will be burned into your monitor by the time you win with how often they'll be up there. You kinda just need to hope and pray that the possessors will play nice and not take over your friends for a small period of time. Eventually, I did get lucky enough that all the guys were freed and were able to work with me to get one ghost into a trap. After that, it was much smoother sailing because some of them got stuck on the other side of the map, so no more possessions were occurring, meaning the guys could eventually get the rest of ghosts into traps and we could finally move on. Thankfully, that is our only encounter with possessors for the entire game, so we won't have to do anything like that ever again. This leads to us chasing after a kidnapping ghost with Peter and Winston, which introduced a bunch of constructs blocking our way. And I mean a bunch. They're throwing at least 10 of these guys at you every single wave, which would be a problem if the game didn't give us literally perfect wombo combo tool. Peter and Winston will be constantly using the shock blaster for this part of the level, and since these are constructs, that just means you need to quickly freeze them with the stasis stream and they'll instantly go down. It made what would otherwise be hell on wheels for this challenge into something actually pretty fun where teamwork actually makes the dream work. And since our stasis stream does practically no damage at all, we never need to worry about accidentally busting, just surviving. That makes this part of the level a cakewalk. The only slightly difficult parts are the skull swarms in the Maya section, but since Peter and Ray are using shotguns, they're able to get them all down no problem, just needed a bit of waiting. That leads us to the Civil War room, which is a giant horde battle against a ton of ghosts. Thankfully no constructs to worry about, just regular old Union and Confederate ghosts. And despite there being like 8 ghosts in this one room, it's really not all that bad. Because half the time, the ghosts are fighting each other, so they don't even bother paying attention to the common enemy here. Not too much else to say about this room, despite how crazy it might look. These ghosts are also very easy compared to some of the early ones, so Peter and Winston have no problem getting them into traps. Hell, sometimes they're able to do it without me even being present to guide them. They're that easy. The next Egypt room is just filled with black slime, which we take out with our slime blower while Peter and Winston take out whatever skulls may end up swarming us. I remember this room giving me a lot of trouble on my casual playthrough for some reason, but for the life of me, I can't understand why. The guys take out the skulls without any problems, and I just sat in a corner blowing slime. The next room is an onslaught of everything we've been dealing with up until this point. The warrior constructs are back, this time with shields, along with more Civil War soldiers. And as crazy as it sounds, it's really not all that bad. Just freeze all the constructs, wear down the soldiers, then let Peter and Winston finish the job for you. The only thing you might have to do differently is rip off a shield or two from a warrior, but your buddies can even sometimes do that, so it's hardly necessary. And the next room is more of the same. Just replace the soldiers with skulls that the guys need to deal with instead of you. Just watch your stream when taking out the constructs and you'll be perfectly fine. Then more hallway battles follow, same wombo combo as always, not much else to say. That finally brings the whole group together so we can head underground, gain our final upgrade, the Meson Collider, and face our next boss, the Chairman. And while I was dreading him leading up to this fight, in actuality it wasn't all that bad, just really long. It was actually kind of fun despite the length. We have to constantly remove these black slime portals in the corners of the arena, but must do so without destroying any of the constructs that come out of them. That means letting the guys do some of the work while we run around and try to deactivate the portals as quickly as possible so we can get back to damaging the big guy. While we can't damage these constructs without the chance of killing them, we can still freeze them for the guys to eventually take them out with slime. Unfortunately, these things' weakness is slime, so the guys will only use a slime blower on them. But it still eventually does the job, allowing us to use the Meson Collider on the big guy to slowly whittle his health down. And unfortunately, we do have to be the one to deal the final blow to send the Chairman packing. Frankly, it's possible the guys were the ones to do it, but I was not about to sit through a 15-minute fight for the second time in a row, so I begrudgingly shot a final meson particle into his eye, finishing him off. But I didn't have to bust anything else during the fight, so I see this as an absolute win. Level 5 is the return to the Sedgewick Hotel, and before we see anything else, I just have to show you this clip.
I was hoping to meet a friendly ghost someday, but I'll settle for harmless right now.
I'm
Pants.
getting a strong valence spike higher up in the building.
Alyssa said she was called to the
Pants.
12th floor. Let's start there.
That is the last thing I was expecting. If that doesn't convince you to buy this game, I don't know what will. Perhaps the objective of this level, the Spider Witch? I'm just saying, would. Well, we know what we've got to do, so let's make our way to the 12th floor. After taking down some bastard skellies with our lovely wombo combo tool. And after heading to the basement to restore power with a backup generator. And after fighting the chef in the kitchen, we really have a lot of side quests before being allowed to see Spider Mommy, huh? Well, the only one worth talking about is the chef, because there's quite a lot going on. We've got a lot of ghosts and stuff is constantly flying around the arena ready to bonk us in the back of the head. But like with most fights, this one is all ghosts, which means we don't have to worry about accidentally killing anything with our out-of-control stream. And since that means all we need to concern ourselves with is surviving, we can drain these cooks of their energy and eventually let the guys suck them into traps. It takes a while, as you'd expect, but as soon as all three of them get their stream on something, they get it in a trap immediately. So now we can finally chase after Spider Mommy. And all she sends are tiny spider constructs to slightly slow us down. But since Egon is a genius, he understands the wombo combo assignment, and we're able to work flawlessly together to take these little guys down. Sometimes it takes him a second to remember how a gun works, but he's still American enough to eventually do it. Spider Mommy then calls us, so you better believe I'm hauling ass over to her.
Come to me, little man. Don't be afraid.
Still smash. Anyway, the fight itself is no issue. Just keep blasting her with whatever the hell you want, then chase her down when she teleports away. There's only a small wave of constructs at the very end, which we continue to wombo combo down because Egon is a freaking goat. Unfortunately, not goat enough to actually finish Spider Mommy off though. So we have to deliver the finishing blow, yet again adding another ghost to our list. I actually ended up doing so much chip damage over time with the stasis stream that dealt the finishing blow. I didn't know you could do that. Anyway, that finishes our return to the Sedgewick, by far the quickest level we've had so far. But believe me, we are nowhere near home free. We've still got the two hardest levels ahead of us, and they did not play nice. Level 6 takes place on Shandor's Lost Island, and is honestly just not a fun level, because all of the enemies here are weak to slime, so there's basically no fun strategies we can come up with to do something interesting. You've got two choices for dealing with these enemies. Slime them, or lower their health and let the guys finish them off, or freeze them and let the guys do the rest. That's the case for the first 20 minutes of this level. It's really boring and not very fun. Unfortunately, after those 20 minutes are up, we're separated from the group, and the level just went from tedious to hellish. We are now in one of the longest solo sections in the game, with some of the most annoying enemies for me to deal with. And not for the reason you're probably thinking. See, I couldn't just blast my way through this section like the others. In all the previous ones, that was the only way to progress, so I just took the L and moved on. But these enemies have a kamikaze attack, meaning they bust themselves. Well, that sounds like great news, doesn't it? I mean, you can just make them explode and you don't need to do anything, right? Well, since just one of the explosion attacks takes a third of my health bar and there are swarms of these guys just waiting to murder me, it's really not that simple. I needed to constantly freeze these guys with the stasis stream, then hope that only one or two at a time would charge and blow up on me. While also trying to avoid the ranged attacks of the ones I couldn't freeze because all of those attacks together would absolutely mean death for me. If this was any other scenario, I could have just blasted them and been on my way. But since I knew they could take themselves out, I knew it was technically possible for me to get past this part without busting. And since I could see victory as a possible outcome, unlike the Marshmallow Room in Level 2, I had to proceed with the challenge. It was one of the hardest things I've done in a long while, and honestly made me start to hate hearing the Ghostbusters theme with every time I died. The big problem is that you're always shoved into cramped pipes and hallways with these things, so you never have room to run around and get your bearings. It was usually just run in, try to freeze something, run for your life, and hope you don't die. Rinse and repeat until they all kamikaze, and cross your fingers you regained health fast enough. I was eventually able to make progress, but not after wanting to murder everything in sight for how awful this was. This led to a giant arena with an actually kinda fun part of the level. We've got more of these constructs, but since we're in a giant arena and not tiny pipes, they aren't nearly as frustrating. We have to run around and remove their portals with slime without accidentally getting them in the crossfire, and eventually getting them to blow up so we can of course progress. All the while, there's a giant black slime golem walking around the arena that I needed to avoid for as long as possible because I thought there was a chance I wouldn't have to kill him. Alas, that last part wasn't true, as there's no way to progress without sliming on the slime monster. But not just one, we actually have to bust two. So yeah, add 2 black slime golems to our list of bustees. Fun. And following that kind of fun section, we had the worst section of the entire challenge. We have to navigate these incredibly small sewer tunnels to get back with the rest of the crew. And it just so happens that these tunnels are filled to the brim with suicidal constructs just waiting to ruin your life. I actually spent 40 freaking minutes trying to get past this section. By far the longest time spent in one area of the game. I could have just called it impossible and moved on, but I had to set that aforementioned precedent on myself. So I had to keep trying because I saw victory slowly getting ever closer. And good God, I wanted to strangle something by the end. Here's the issue. We're thrown a few waves of constructs as we make our way to the other end of the sewers. These waves can have anywhere from 5 to 10 enemies at once trying to murder you. The only way to defeat them is for them to blow up. And blowing up really freaking hurts. There's basically no way to avoid the damage aside from getting them trapped behind other guys that you froze solid and hoping your dodge gets you far enough away. But more often than not, you're taking the full brunt of the hit and losing a third of your health. Combine that with their ranged attacks, which are incredibly difficult to avoid thanks to the small space, and you've got yourself a one-way ticket to seeing the Grim Reaper. This section was so freaking stupid because every time I was making progress, a single stray bullet or explosion would end my run and I'd have to go through it all over again. On the incredibly, and I mean infinitesimally small plus side, you don't need all of them to blow up to proceed. The explosion is a double-edged sword. It not only damages you, but also damages other constructs. So if you've got a good group frozen and 2 of them explode, you just took out a good number of these guys and have a better chance at winning. The biggest thing you need to remember though is that in between waves, you sit there and wait for your health to regenerate. It takes time, but it's far less time than sitting through all the frickin' loading screens. The final section here is by far the worst, because it has the most enemies in the smallest area. If you go too far in, the door behind you will just shut and you'll be locked in this tiny room with them. But you need to get close to make them blow up, so what the hell are you supposed to do? You just have to wait for them to charge, freeze, run away, repeat. It's stupid and tedious and way harder than this section was ever intended to be played, but here we are. Welcome to Ghostbusters, I think I'm ready to die. Excuse me. Thankfully, the rest of the level is nowhere near as bad as this section. We just gotta work with the guys to take out some slime constructs. These guys have a ton of health, so it's in your best interest to slime some of them down, then freeze them with a stasis stream so your friends can do the rest of the work. It's only quote-unquote difficult because the ghosts fly around so much, making it hard for the guys to actually get a lock on. But if you freeze them, that shouldn't be a problem. One section causes a small wrinkle in things because there's a lot of portals that eventually spawn in a slime golem. But since we have the guys now, they can easily take it out on their own after wearing it down a little bit. That eventually leads us to a boss arena against the juvenile Slore, which is more than just a little bit stupid. It's more of the same, blast slime into his face to eventually win. But first we have to take out these floating eyeballs. These things have basically no health, but it's still too much for just our friends to get on their own. So we have to do an incredibly quick blast of slime to whittle them down enough for the guys to finish them off. After that, it's a relatively simple ordeal or staying alive long enough for this thing to do the one attack that leaves it vulnerable. Halfway through, some more eyes will spawn that are meant to cause problems, but they barely attack, so it's not worth it trying to take them out, especially since the guys are way too focused on the big guy to bother attacking the eyes. Doubly unfortunately, we have to deliver the finishing blow on this guy yet again. The team's mediocre, unupgraded slime blowers aren't nearly powerful enough to take away this small tick of health. Add this big ol' thing to the count, but with that, we've finished the worst level in the game, so it's time for the finale. Welcome to Level 7, the Central Park Cemetery, one of the longest final levels in video game history and one of the toughest final obstacles for a challenge I've ever had to face. Shit took me 2 hours to beat. The opening section is nothing to worry about. It's all about the atmosphere. You don't have to do a damn thing. When you reunite with Ray, though, that's when things go all screwy. We're almost immediately presented with multiple new constructs and a big ol' ghost pair to deal with, giving us merely a taste of what's to come in the future. Thankfully, by this point in the game, Ray has wisened up and knows how to do the wombo combo, so we can freeze the construct stall with a stasis stream, and he'll follow up with a shock blast to take them out. The ghosts, not so much. He's still struggling a little bit because these guys are fighters. But Ray is eventually able to get them in a trap all on his own, showing exactly what we'll be dealing with for the rest of the level. These guys do not give up easily, and Ray is going to be struggling to fight them the whole time. This continues for a long time in the level. We get a small break, fight a lot of constructs and ghosts, repeat. And if Ray is too focused on the ghosts, he won't pay attention to the constructs, which are a problem since we really need you to take them down, Ray. Oh, sorry. Ray! There's this one ghost that spawns in skulls, and I probably busted a couple of them while trying to take him down, but honestly, I was so tired at this point that I really didn't care. They aren't part of the swarm, so they're the least of my worries. Ray is eventually able to trap him anyway, so we can move on. And we move on to another new beast, grave golems. But these guys are actually a little different than regular golems, because we don't have to defeat them. Their headlamp weakness does need to be ripped off by us, but it becomes vulnerable before running out of energy. Meaning we can rip it off before it almost dies, then let our buddies do the work to finish it. It made these guys a bit of a challenge compared to regular golems, which I had been treating as regular enemies up until this point. So, thank you grave golems for actually impacting the challenge. Round of applause for these little guys. We get a decent number of them in this first section, which are no problem, but then we get more in this area with a bunch of constructs as well. Same deal as before though, just freeze them where they stand and let Ray do the heavy lifting with the shock blaster. There's another skull summoning ghost as well, but he's no issue, and we can make Ray catch him just fine. Even this crazy section with 2 golems and some 7 zombie constructs is nothing compared to our wombo combo and Ray doing all the hard work. But that was the last fun time that was had in this level, because the rest is why I called this one of the hardest challenges I've ever done. The next battle has us facing down an endlessly respawning wave of constructs, 4 ghosts, and a grave golem. The golem is no trouble as always. We can just spam its health down immediately with the shock blaster, remove the lamp with the capture stream, and then let Ray eventually finish the work. The big problems are the infinite constructs, which we just flat out can't deal with since they'll always keep coming, and the ghosts, which are just constantly causing problems. These ghosts, as I mentioned, are incredibly difficult to capture, so Ray has a really tough time getting them into traps. And when you have to do that with 4 of them that Ray is constantly shifting his attention between, you've got yourself a bad time. The constructs aren't any easier, as despite our wombo combo abilities, Ray isn't the fastest at switching weapons and actually shooting them. And when he's constantly switching attention as well between all the ghosts and constructs, he's just slow as molasses. Thankfully, it's possible that the constructs will end up stuck behind some of the walls back where they spawn and have trouble getting to your location, meaning there's a chance you won't have to deal with them for some time and can focus on the ghosts. But like I said, there's 4 of them, and they're incredibly sporadic, making it super difficult to trap them. But Ray could eventually do it, and we could finally move forward. What follows is a small underground section that has infinitely respawning gravestone constructs. I assume you're meant to take them out, which is why they keep respawning, but since I didn't want to do that, I just ran past them to the next section. They actually followed me out with Ray eventually in tow, and they kept trying to attack me while Ray just stood there doing nothing. I guess that his AI priority changed, and he didn't care about these small enemies while talking through the cutscene. I just kept freezing them and can't really tell what happened. Either Ray got them, or they just died from being too far away from their spawn point. But as I always say, we take those. In the midst of all that was supposed to be a section against these angel statues, where you tether them to the gate to knock it down, busting them in the process. But, yeah, I didn't want to do that, so I just stood near the gate, took a hit, and the game let me progress. I still can't tell if this is a glitch or intended exploit, but either way, we take those too. This section was a pain in the ass casually, so I'm just glad that wasn't the case here too. This leads us to the final encounter of the game. An encounter that took a whopping 35 minutes to complete. And not even because I was accidentally busting stuff or the guys just couldn't do it. It was just genuinely that hard to stay alive with all the crap the game decided to throw at me. Because it throws everything but the kitchen sink at you for this section. You've got graven zombie constructs, up to 6 regular ghosts, and 2 statue golems just ripe for the ass whooping. All the while, your guys are constantly getting knocked down, forcing you to essentially play pocket medic the whole time rather than doing your job and busting ghosts. Oh, and did I mention that the constructs are once again infinitely spawning? Yep. Literally, the only thing that makes this section remotely possible is that you have all 4 allies that can sometimes do things. When they all focus on a single ghost, they'll pretty much always get them into traps. But more often than not, when they finally get a ghost over the trap, the constructs will respawn and start slicing into your boys, forcing them to drop whatever they're doing and shoot them instead. It is a painfully slow process waiting for these guys to get the ghosts into traps. Especially when you're going to be constantly reviving them like a medic on a bad MBM team. And when the guys finally start getting their act together and trap some of the ghosts, angel statues spawn, making the bullet hell drop through at least 4 of the 9 circles. Just look at this clip here. All the guys are down, so I revive one of them. Then I get knocked down, presumably by an angel because I'm at full health and they do a metric fuck tons of damage. This starts a nearly 3-minute game of revive and shine where I get knocked down, someone revives me, I revive the guys, I go down, they revive me, they all go down, rinse and repeat until I need to restart from the very beginning. It is one of the stupidest things that's ever happened to me in a challenge, and I hope to God it doesn't somehow happen to you if you decide to do this yourselves. If you can somehow avoid all this crap and keep your boys alive, they'll eventually get the ghosts into traps. Then you'll have to deal with these 2 statue golems, which thankfully behave like grave golems in that you don't need to be the ones to try to bust them. Just wear them down, rip the tridents from their heads, and let the guys do the rest of the work. There are absolutely no ghosts in this section, only a few constructs when one of the golems goes down, but that can easily be dealt with a wombo combo. That finally ends this horrible section and brings us to the final battle against Shandor. He's easy. We don't have to deal with any ghosts or constructs during the fight, but as you'd expect, we need to be the ones to deliver the final blow because of boss fight. With one last crossing of the streams, a pretty woman, and Peck, saved, and Shandor defeated, New York is officially safe without Rookie here ever committing any ghostly war crimes. Oh wait, we lost the challenge back in level 1, huh? As you'd probably expect, no, you cannot beat Ghostbusters without busting any ghosts. To beat the game, you are required to bust 22 candlestick constructs. I'm gonna say 24 marsh minions in this area, 20 in the first room and 4 in the following, but I really don't know. 30 mini minions, 1 Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, 3 swarms of books, 5 book golems, 2 magma golems, 1 mirror ghost, 1 Azultor, 1 chairman, 1 spider mommy, 2 black slime golems, 1 juvenile slore, and 1 Evo Shandor, for a grand total of 96 ghosts busted in Ghostbusters. As for a breakdown of what we're dealing with, we've got 76 constructs, 9 golems, 6 bosses, 3 swarms, and only 1 traditional ghost. This number could definitely be brought down though if we didn't have all the Marshmallow Massacre in level 2, so if you think you can do better, please be my guest. But I think that will finally do it for this challenge. Chaps, thanks for watching. This was definitely one of the hardest challenges I've done in a long while, but one I feel like I could recommend. It was a very different way of playing the game, though be warned, it does take a while for it to get good. You really need all the upgrades for this run to be worth it. But with that in mind, do all the YouTube stuff, because hooray! Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later, chaps.
I'm
Pants.
getting a strong valence spike higher up in the building.
Alyssa said she was called to the
Pants.
12th floor. Let's start there.